What if I told you that the reason you keep losing points on TOEFL listening has nothing to do with your English level? What if the real problem is that your brain is trying to translate every single word, and by the time you finish translating sentence 1, sentence 5 is already gone? Thousands of students score a perfect 30 on reading, but freeze the second the audio starts playing. Not because they don't understand English, but because nobody ever taught them how the TOEFL actually tests listening in 2026. The test has changed, the traps have changed. And if you're still studying the way people studied 5 years ago, you are training yourself to fail in real time. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because I'm going to break down exactly what's different now, why most study methods are quietly sabotaging you, and the 6 things you need to fix immediately if you want a score that actually reflects how much English you know. Passive listening is silently destroying your score. Here's something shocking. The #1 habit advanced learners rely on, listening to podcasts, YouTube, Netflix in the background, barely moves the needle on TOEFL listening, and in some cases actively hurts it. Passive listening trains your brain to catch general vibes and keywords while letting the details slide past. And TOEFL listening is built entirely on details. Every conversation and lecture is loaded with specific numbers, cause and effect relationships, professor opinions disguised as facts, and small qualifying words like however or unless that completely flip the meaning of a sentence. If you've only ever practiced passive listening, your brain has learned to ignore exactly the information the test is hunting for. In 2026, active listening is non-negotiable. That means listening once for gist, then a second time while actively predicting what's coming, then a third time while forcing yourself to reconstruct the speaker's argument from memory before checking the transcript. It feels slower, it feels uncomfortable, but this is the difference between someone who understands English and someone who can prove it under exam pressure in real time with no pause button and no rewind. Passive exposure builds vague familiarity. Active listening builds precision. Only precision gets you points. Your note-taking system is probably working against you. Most students take notes the way they take notes in their native language, trying to write down full sentences, or worse, trying to write down everything. By the time you've written 3 words, the speaker has already said 15 more, and you've lost the thread completely. This is one of the most common, most fixable reasons scores stall. The fix is a symbol-based shorthand system. Arrows for cause and effect, a plus sign for and, a slash for or, abbreviations for common academic words like info, def, x, and quick vertical lists instead of full sentences for enumerated points. The goal isn't to write down words, it's to capture structure. Every TOEFL lecture and conversation follows a shape, a main idea, supporting points, an example, sometimes a contrast or a problem solution pattern. If your notes capture that shape, you can answer almost any question, even if you missed a word here or there. If your notes are just scattered fragments of vocabulary, you have nothing to reconstruct meaning from when the question appears. Practice this until it's automatic, because during the real test, you will not have time to think about how to take notes. You'll only have time to use the system you already trained. In 2026, distractor answers are more deceptive than ever. Older TOEFL prep material trains you to spot obviously wrong answers, but current listening sections are built with distractors that sound almost identical to the correct answer, differing by a single detail, a number, a name, a time frame, or a reversed cause and effect relationship. This is shocking to most test takers because it means being close to correct isn't good enough anymore. The test is specifically designed to punish students who listen for general meaning instead of exact meaning. A professor might say a theory was popular until the 1980s, and the distractor answer will simply say it's still popular today. One detail flipped, and if you weren't listening precisely, you'll choose it confidently. The only real defense is training yourself to notice qualifying language. Words like initially, later, however, despite, on the other hand. These small words carry enormous weight in TOEFL listening because they signal a shift, and shifts are where most wrong answers are built. Start treating every qualifying word as a red flag that says, pay attention right here, because the test writers absolutely are. Lecture structure is more predictable than students think, and that predictability is a weapon. Almost every TOEFL lecture follows a recognizable pattern. The professor introduces a topic, states a problem or a question, gives 2 or 3 supporting examples or studies, and often ends with an application or exception. Once you recognize this shape, you stop listening to random information and start listening for a role. Is this an example, a contrast, a definition, a cause? This is shocking to a lot of learners because it means you can often predict what type of information is coming next before the professor even says it. If a professor says, there are 2 reasons for this, your brain should immediately create 2 open slots waiting to be filled, and that dramatically increases the chance you catch both, instead of only remembering whichever one came last. Conversations follow patterns too. A problem is stated, then 2 or 3 possible solutions are discussed, usually with the speakers disagreeing before landing on one. Training yourself to recognize these structures in 2026 material, not outdated recordings, means you're studying the actual shape the current test uses, not a shape that used to exist 5 years ago. Your vocabulary gap isn't about hard words, it's about signal words. Most students assume their vocabulary is fine because they understand the news, movies, and YouTube videos without a problem. But TOEFL listening isn't tested on your general vocabulary. It's tested on your ability to catch discourse markers and academic connector language, and this is where even strong English speakers lose points. Words like nevertheless, as a result, conversely, to illustrate, and notwithstanding rarely show up in casual speech, but they are the backbone of every academic lecture. And missing them means missing the entire logical structure of what's being said. This is genuinely shocking once you realize it. You can know 95% of the individual words in a lecture and still get the answer wrong purely because you didn't register the 3-word connector that told you a contrast, a conclusion, or an example was coming. In 2026, build a specific list of these academic connector phrases and drill them until recognizing them is instant and automatic, because they are doing far more work in each answer than any advanced vocabulary word ever will. You need to train under real exam conditions, not comfortable ones. The final and most overlooked issue is environment. Students practice listening in quiet rooms with headphones, pausing whenever they want, replaying sections freely, and then walk into a testing center with background noise. Other students talking into microphones nearby, a strict single playback, and a countdown timer creating real pressure. That mismatch is shocking in how much it costs people, because their skills genuinely exist, but they've never been tested under authentic conditions, so the pressure alone causes comprehension to collapse. In 2026, TOEFL is fully aware that test centers are noisy and rushed, and it is not designed to accommodate a perfectly calm listening environment. You must simulate this. Practice listening only once, with mild background noise, without pausing, and with a visible timer running. Build the habit of staying calm when you miss a word instead of mentally spiraling and losing the next 3 sentences while you panic about the one you missed. The students who succeed aren't the ones with the biggest vocabulary, they're the ones who train their nervous system to stay steady under real exam pressure. So here's the truth. TOEFL listening in 2026 isn't testing how much English you know, it's testing how precisely you can extract structure, catch shifts in meaning, and stay calm while doing it in real time with no second chances. Fix your passive listening habits, build a real note-taking system, learn to hunt for qualifying language, recognize lecture structure before it even unfolds, master connector words instead of chasing rare vocabulary, and train yourself under real pressured conditions instead of comfortable ones. Do these 6 things consistently, and the score you get will finally match the English you actually have inside you.